Welcome to the Breath of Fresh Air Dental Podcast. Whether you're a seasoned practice owner, a new dentist, or an office manager looking to enhance your skills, this podcast is for you. Our friendly and knowledgeable hosts are here to answer your burning questions, address common pain points, and provide practical solutions to help you overcome any obstacles you may face. Our hosts, Amanda DeMoura and Sarah Hamlin, bring to the table lengthy careers in both clinical dentistry and practice administration. They now preside as the CEO and COO of Essential Dental Services.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Breath of Fresh Air podcast. I'm Amanda DeMoura.
And I'm Sarah Hamlin.
And as I was looking at my calendar, it sort of said we hadn't recorded in 2 months. Has it really been that long? I feel like it hasn't quite that long.
Listen, I just yesterday went to go order the ADA, the CDT code book for 2025. And I was like looking at it and I was like, usually these don't like ship out or aren't ready to go until like October-ish. So like, gosh, that's annoying that we're going to have to wait. It would be nice to have it now. And then I looked at the calendar and realized that October is in like 3 days. Like, what? How did that happen?
September really did fly by, but I think we've been a little bit crazy. September is the month that everyone kind of is getting back into their routine.
Mm-hmm.
And I was traveling a little bit.
Yes.
And,
For some reason, it seems like a lot of the dental conference events are in September, October. I don't know why everybody plans them for the same month, but that happens, it seems.
Oh, yes. So I'm so sorry. I'm saying I was traveling. Sarah was also traveling. Sarah was at the ADOM conference. I had a lot of FOMO not being able to go this year. It's like, that's sort of like Sarah and I's thing.
Mm-hmm.
Get to go to that and
hang out.
But
also learn.
Learn, but also make time for some serious relaxation and good food, which we didn't quite get to do that this year, obviously, because I wasn't there. But how was it?
It was great. It was really good. I definitely did some learning, took a bunch of courses, of course, saw some vendors, saw people that I normally only get to see at the ADOM conference, which was great. So some networking, and I did squeeze in some time at the spa too. So not complaining about that.
Yes. So next year it's in Texas, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. So Sarah was there. The reason I didn't go is I was speaking at the Pediatric Dental Growth Summit in Maui. That was the week after. And that I wanted to do both things, but I just knew that I would not be able to swing both things.
Mm-hmm.
So the summit I was speaking at was amazing, kind of tough to not be amazing in Hawaii, but it was a great group of a lot of pediatric dentists and their teams and orthodontists, and just kind of a great audience and great experience. So that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it sounds like it was a good trip. I am very jealous about being in Hawaii too. So
it was a long flight. I think it's a long flight from anywhere, but especially the East Coast.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Especially when you're pregnant. That makes it a little bit harder.
Mm-hmm.
So this time and the time before that I went to Hawaii, I was also pregnant, and I don't know why I keep going there when I'm pregnant. I clearly am not learning my lesson. Because 1, the flight is extra hard, and 2, I can't have any Mai Tais.
Yep.
Okay. So what we wanted to talk about today was something that Sarah and I kind of talk about on a regular basis, and that is whether a practice truly needs a dental consultant or a kick-butt office manager. And we work with a lot of practices that are also working with a consultant. And I have a lot of very dear friends who are consultants. This is not to slight the profession or their services by any means, but we feel as though sometimes it should be leaning more in the direction of a practice manager. So we wanted to talk a little bit about when you might need either or maybe both, or or some kind of combo of the two.
Right. Or I see very often on some of these Facebook groups and stuff too, people be like, I just got hired as an office manager and I've never been an office manager before. What should I be doing? So, this kind of touches on that too, is like what we see as kind of the key components and key things that an office manager should be doing, or how we should be helping the office as an office manager versus a consultant. Also, just keeping in mind and saying at the top of the podcast too, that every office is different and every office is going to have a little bit of different needs. Every dentist is involved in a different way. Owners are involved and different from the practicing dentist sometimes. So every office is different, but hopefully this will kind of be a good overview of when one might be better than the other, or maybe both are needed, or who knows, any combination of the above.
Yeah. And also, like you were sort of mentioning, how to really support your office manager and get them to be where you want them to be, if that's what you want, because the role of an office manager is also pretty different from office to office.
Yes.
So we can talk a little bit about that too, and what that kind of looks like to both Sarah and I, as we've been practice managers. So the reason that I think we talk about this regularly is with a lot of our billing clients, not a lot, but some of them are in varying degrees of practice management disarray. And and some can't seem to get out of their own way. They've been working with a consultant for maybe years and really not seeing any improvement. And we sort of feel like the reason behind that is because they truly need someone in their office 5 days a week that is managing the office and doing checks and balances, who really knows what they're doing, who's watching out for mistakes, who's training their staff, who's really, really hands-on. And again, we have a lot of wonderful consultants who offer a great service, but they're not in your practice every single day. Of course, they're remoting in and you're having Zoom meetings with them, and they are coming in maybe a few times a month, maybe a little bit less than that. But that's not quite enough for the office to improve the way they need to improve.
Yeah.
And, I also kind of want to preface this by saying there are offices who just cannot be helped.
Yeah.
And that kind of comes from the top, which is the practice owner and the dentist, who just, they can't seem to get out of their own way, and they're not going to take the consultant's awesome advice and put it into play. They're just not. So,
yeah. Also, I think an important thing to point out at this point too is that there's a lot of different consultants in that space, and for good reason, because a lot of them offer insight and advice and focus on different parts of the practice. So that's sometimes what we see too, is like offices are working with a consultant, but that consultant is working with the doctor and helping the doctor map out like a 5-year strategy for selling the practice. So they're looking at like a lot of higher level things and focusing on that, and not really focusing on, this is how you post an insurance payment, this is how you do a write-off, this is how the front desk should be running on a day-to-day basis. So it's not necessarily the fault of the consultant, just that that's not within the scope of what they help offices with. So there's a lot of kind of things at play when it comes to consultant versus office manager versus why is it working or why isn't it working. And I think that's something important to keep in mind too, is the consultant might just not be focusing on those things because that's not their specialty.
And I think as we're looking towards the future, a lot of consultants are going to be and continue to get even more like niche.
Yeah.
So they're a leadership consultant, they're a team building consultant, and maybe not necessarily focusing on your revenue cycle, which of course Sarah and I just think is the most important thing in the world.
Not that we're biased or anything.
Right. So we kind of see we see that ball being dropped. So when you're seeking out a consultant, you want to make sure what their scope is. You know, you obviously want to read their contract and services very closely and make sure that they are going to and they're equipped to help you with all of these things. And again, being a little biased, but your revenue is very important and how, you know, you're paying all your staff and yourself. And that all kind of comes down to what's happening at the front office and with your insurance and your patient payments and things. Those need to be handled by someone who knows what the heck they're doing.
Yeah.
So
I think the other thing, and maybe we can kind of get a little more streamlined here, but the other thing I would say is like, really, if you're a practice owner and you're thinking that you need a consultant, really take a minute to sit down and say, what has me feeling like I need a consultant? Is it because I keep seeing on social media that all of these other practices are hiring a consultant? Like maybe I need a consultant. Am I missing out on something? Or is there something specific going on with your practice that you have concerns about? Because if there is something specific, then there probably is a consultant that you can find who specializes in that specific concern. But also something that I see a lot with practices with consultants is that the owner doesn't really want to listen to the consultant's advice. Like, so if you feel like you have good systems in place, or you feel like you have a really good idea of how you want your practice to run, keep in mind that a consultant might not be the way to go, because the consultant's job is not to bend to your will at every turn and kind of work for you as much as it is to work with you. And work with you on guiding you in like new strategies and things that you might not have thought of and things that they've seen work in other practices. So if you're pretty dead set on the processes that you're using in your practice right now, then maybe a practice manager or somebody who's going to be a part of your team working for you as opposed to working with you might be a better solution for what you're looking for.
And I also, as I was thinking through this episode, I realized it's kind of easy for Sarah and I to say like, oh, you just need an amazing practice manager. Yes, I realize those are a little hard to find.
Right.
And I also, you know, I'm a pretty modest and humble person. So for me to say like, I was an amazing practice manager, but I think both Sarah and I took our practice management careers to a different level than a lot do. And that's kind of how we ended up transitioning to a different business and growing businesses and things like that. But I think maybe we can share the things that we did to get to that point and ways offices can support their practice manager in getting to that next level of where you want them to be.
Right.
And I would say, obviously, Sarah and I, after practice management, we did and have and are doing consulting ourselves. So we've kind of sampled it all at this point. But I think the very first thing to consider is this person the right fit to be a practice manager? And do they have the drive to want to improve? If they don't, they're not the right person for that role. And we've seen this a lot. It's just someone who's clocking in and clocking out. They don't really have an interest in improving systems or anything like that. This is just kind of a job to them. That's not the right person for the role.
You know, the thing that I have said to some offices or said, you know, in conversations about this too, I think the thing that gets overlooked the most when offices are trying to promote like an office manager from within, the thing that people often is like, oh, Susie's been working at the front desk with us for 15 years and she does really great at answering the phone and she does really great at entering insurance payments and everything. So we need a practice manager. She must be the best option because she's been here for so long and she knows our systems up front the best. But the most important part to me when considering a practice manager, honestly, is that part of manager, of realizing that a practice manager, or a key part of the practice manager, as far as I see it, is managing the people and the team within your practice. And in all the practices that I have seen, managing the human capital of the practice and the human component of the practice is usually the first thing the doctor is wanting to get off of their plate. The doctor's like, I want to fill cavities. I do not want to be dealing with Jane and Alice complaining about their schedule, or somebody needs a day off and blah, blah, blah. Like, they typically don't want to have to deal with that. So those seem to be the first tasks that get handed off to a practice manager. And if the person that you're promoting into that practice manager role doesn't have any experience in management and or is not on great terms with the rest of the team, or doesn't have those people skills, then you're really setting yourself and your new practice manager up for a lot of struggle, because it's a lot more, being a practice manager involves a lot more than just knowing how the front desk operates. And that's probably the number one thing that I see kind of blow up in offices' faces or turn into a big struggle, is not remembering the human component and keeping that in mind when promoting from within.
Yep. I mean, managing people is really hard. Especially, I feel any size practice, but larger teams for sure. That if this is a practice manager of a large team, sometimes that can just take over the majority of your time.
Mm-hmm.
So you want someone who's really good at that, and taking courses on leadership and being there for your team is super important. But I think we'll talk a little bit more about courses and things.
Mm-hmm.
But you really want someone who's showing a lot of initiative. And the first thing that I did, because I was promoted from within, and the very first thing I did was started taking every class under the sun that I could possibly take. And that continued throughout my practice management career. That never stopped, and that should never stop. And the practice manager before me, I can't remember her ever taking one. You know what I mean? So that's the prime example of someone just clocking in, clocking out, and collecting a paycheck. So as we all know, dentistry is just ever evolving. Specifically what you're looking over at the front desk, specifically insurance, is ever changing. If you have someone in charge who's not keeping up with trends, that's not great for your practice at all.
And so insurance trends are changing too, but back to the human side, like, how much have we seen things change with, the Gen Zers versus the baby boomers versus the elder millennials, which is the best generation. Those, there's a lot of things that have transitioned very quickly when it comes to the human part of your office too, and how the newer generation, interacts with their work, how they feel about needing personal time, how they feel about their commitment to their job. All of these things are new and evolving things that definitely, we could all benefit from taking some courses on that too, or just learning about that too, and realizing that there's people that have a different approach to work than, you do. There's varying opinions on that too. So don't focus those courses just on insurance and your practice management software and that kind of stuff. Like, cast a wide net when it comes to those things.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of classes out there about bridging that generational gap between, Gen Zers and millennials and baby boomers, because you're going to have a wide array in the office. And I've definitely seen, the divide there, where the baby boomers are complaining that the younger generation just doesn't want to work or whatever it might be. And you need someone who can deal with all that and make your office culture cohesive.
Mm-hmm.
And not just cohesive, but also nice to work in.
Yep.
You want your practice manager needs to set the tone, much like you do,
Mm-hmm.
but your practice manager does too. And you want everyone, or at least I did, I wanted everyone to enjoy coming to work as much as I did. Of course, not everyone is going to do that, no matter where they're working. But I wanted to make it as enjoyable as I possibly could. So every practice manager, that should be their goal. And if it's not, again, wrong fit.
Yep. And I think there's a fine line too when kind of trying to pick out an office manager. Again, understanding that the market for office managers is not
robust.
Yes, not overflowing with candidates at this time. But if you're lucky enough to have multiple candidates that you're kind of considering for this, I think definitely taking into consideration how this person vibes with your goals as an owner for the practice too. Like if your goals are very numbers driven and goals driven and wanting to hit certain benchmarks and be at a certain spot, then, finding somebody who understands your goals, aligns with those goals, but also complements them and can help motivate your team to get where you want them to be in a way that you might not be able to, is something to consider. Because I have seen this happen a lot too, where the owner has some really specific way that they would like the practice run, or some really key things that they consider important for the practice, and the practice manager doesn't think that those things are important or doesn't align with those, and that's just a recipe for disaster as well.
For sure. And sometimes when you're hiring from within, hopefully you already know those things about that person, so that's a benefit of doing that. But that just can't always happen. Nor do people who nor does your treatment coordinator always want to be promoted to office manager. And I'm not gonna lie, I can't say I blame them for that.
Yeah.
There are many practice managers out there who have said, hey, I've had enough, I just want to go back to being a treatment coordinator, whatever it may be. So as a practice manager, there was a lot that I did, and as we already mentioned, there's a lot of ways this role can vary depending on the practice. I'm not even sure practice manager was the appropriate term, but I mean, I really, really did absolutely everything.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I was checking over all metrics and KPIs. If that's something important to you and you want your practice manager to do that, they definitely need proper training on that. Now, that is something that some consultants are going to be doing for you as well. So I, definitely running AR reports, outstanding claims report. That was my baby. Obviously, I was very concerned about, not concerned because it looked good, but just keeping my eye on our insurance coordinator, making sure she was doing all the right things, making sure all of our numbers matched, doing all of the reporting and things to our accountant, doing all payroll, filling out any dang IRS survey and things that came to the practice. Absolutely anything and everything. Organizing all staff meetings and doing all the hiring and training and, being there for the team. There's a lot that goes into it, and deciding what of those things you want your practice manager to do is important. And that role can grow as trust grows as well, because I know, not everyone you just kind of hire fresh, you're going to say, hey, here's my payroll, do it. Right? There's some trust that needs to build there.
Yes, nor should you be doing that. Also, let's say that do your due diligence on whomever you hire and make sure you're not just handing over the keys to the kingdom, like, boy, have seen that happen too.
Yes, and be checking up on your practice manager. if they are running payroll, be sure you're looking at that every now and then, specifically their paycheck.
Yeah. Well, or if you can't do it or you don't want to do it, then you need to have a bookkeeper or an accountant who's doing it as well. The more eyes and more hands that you have on this stuff for checks and balances, especially when it comes to the money that's coming in and out of your practice, the better. Everybody should have somebody checking up on them there's no excuse for that otherwise. Everybody should just have somebody checking on what they're doing.
Absolutely. So, one thing I kind of wanted to talk about is there's a lot of varying opinions out there on when and if and what size you need to be, what size of a practice you need to be before you need an office manager. And I wanted to see how you felt about that. I'm going to save my opinion and I'm going to let you go first.
Okay. I think the one that I have heard the most is that the kind of quote unquote magic number is like right around 10. Like if you have less than 10 team members, you probably don't need an office manager, and you as the doctor should be handling pretty much everything. And then once you get to that magic number of 10, then it's time to start considering someone to help you out. I'm not sure that I agree with that as like a hard and fast rule, because again, I think every office is different. And I think what the most important part is that you as a practice owner have an idea of how involved you want to be with all these aspects of your practice. I've met lots of doctors who want to have a hand in every single thing that's going on in the office. And if that is what you want to do, that's great. You're certainly, entitled to do that as a practice owner. And then that means maybe you don't need a practice manager for 10 or more staff members because you are in the middle of it and you can handle it because that's your choice. But I have met plenty of doctors and practice owners who do not want to be a part of anything other than doing dentistry, taking care of their patients, and, helping their practice grow. They really want to have somebody else being the expert in hiring and firing and HR and payroll and revenue cycle management and all of that stuff. They just don't have the capacity or the time to focus on those things. So if that's the case, then I think those kinds of offices need an office manager probably at 4 employees, 5 employees maybe. So I think it really just depends on the practice and depends on how involved the doctor wants to be in what is going on in the office as well.
I feel like I see in a lot of Facebook groups, dentists can be pretty negative about practice managers. And I don't know if that's because they've been burned before.
Right.
I'm going to assume it is. But to me, obviously, I take the role very seriously. That was my career.
Mm-hmm.
So seeing someone kind of slight that is usually offensive.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, and I know this might be kind of hard because when you're just starting out and you're small, maybe there's not this huge budget for an office manager's salary. But I almost think that the practice manager should be the first person that you hire. They should be your sole front desk employee.
Mm-hmm.
They're kind of doing it. I mean, if you're a startup, for sure. I mean, there's going to be duties that the dentist and your office manager might be sharing. That's not like because, and I would encourage that because as a startup, I mean, you really need to like get your hands on everything and make sure things are set up the way you want them set up and set up correctly.
Mm-hmm.
I also think startups should work with a consultant, a great startup consultant, because there's just no way to navigate all of that by yourself. It just isn't.
Yeah.
You can work the consultant's fee into your startup loan, and I highly recommend people do that. But anyhow, yeah, I think that should be your first hire. And that way, systems are in place right from the beginning. You're building a good foundation and you can kind of go from there. And then when you grow to the size of your office manager needing some support, some admin support, well, then you can hire then.
Yep.
But I think the office manager growing with you and growing with the practice is going to benefit far more than someone coming in later. I just feel like maybe that isn't always that well received, or maybe things are a mess by the time you finally get an office manager.
Yep. I have worked in a practice. The very first practice that I was an office manager in was that exact situation. For a long chunk of time, it was myself and the doctor as the only full-time employees at the practice. And that was, hard on me for a lot of reasons, because I was kind of filling a lot of roles. Yes, more hats than I should have been probably. And so, it was hard on me. It was a lot of wear and tear on me. It was also happened to be right around the time that my kids were born. So, a lot going on in my personal life as well that I'm sure kind of played into that burnout. But I do think that that's something to be aware of if you take that approach, is just if you find a good practice manager and they are kind of the first person that you hire, don't run them into the ground. Don't take advantage of them being a hard worker and being willing to do all aspects of the office for too long, because you'll run them off. At some point, they're not going to want to do all of that. So I think that's, there's some balance that needs to be struck there, as with everything. But I don't think that that's a bad approach by any means, because you and your practice manager kind of grow together and learn together. And then, supporting them when you're ready for that that's I think a good way to go.
Yes, definitely be mindful of their workload. That's kind of why I said you should be sharing things to start. And you, as you said, you're both learning and growing together.
Yes.
Any other thoughts? Or
I just think, I was also thinking when you said that too, is we're not, again, we've touched on the hiring kind of struggles too. It's if you are in that position where you just need to get somebody at your front desk answering the phone or helping you put in insurance payments, but the people that you can find or the candidates that you can find aren't quite office management material, your hands might be tied. That might be the most ideal option, but that doesn't mean that that's what you're going to be able to do or make happen in the real world. So it's hard. And that's where it goes back to, every practice is different. Every situation is different depending on where you're at geographically and what kind of requirements you have for your practice manager that you're trying to hire. All of those things come into play with if you'll be able to make that happen or not.
It's hard out there. It is. But the first thing, just to kind of recap, or drive this point home more so, is making sure not just your practice manager, but every member on your team is taking CE and courses to better themselves and ultimately your practice. But ADOM is a fantastic resource. That was the first place I jumped in when I became the practice manager. I think I was probably taking some of their stuff before that. But they have courses and resources for every different facet of your office, from marketing to insurance to leadership to everything in between. And it's nice to have those resources kind of at your fingertips. And I think prior to ADOM, these were things that were hard to learn as an office manager, so that is really important. And, finding someone who's, again, showing initiative. I was always, cooking up new ways to do things and different strategies I had for this, and combing through office expenses to see where I could save the practice money, finding, classes I wanted us to take as a team, showing interest in improving our perio protocol and our perio program. If a practice manager is coming to you with ideas and things of their own, that's a good sign.
Right.
If things are piquing their interest, that's positive, and that's someone you need to keep around.
Yeah. And I think, I just was thinking, I think sometimes hearing people I don't want to say overstepping their position, but hearing people like trying to grow and, you know, expand beyond what they're currently doing sometimes can ruffle some feathers, I feel like. So I think just keeping a really open mind about, you know, team members who are bringing those things up, like I think generally they're bringing those things up out of a good place, a kind place, a wanting to see the practice succeed place. So I think it can be hard sometimes to hear like, hey, if you put this system in place, I don't think this system is working. It can be hard to hear that kind of feedback, but try to take it from a place of, no, this is actually encouraging that my team member wants to see the office do well. They thought it was worth bringing this to my attention, you know, all of those kinds of things, instead of getting defensive and worked up about it.
Yeah, that they care enough to express this to you. And I also would be open to hearing these things, because especially when it comes to front office stuff, like if your team is coming to you like, hey, our patient communications software is crap, can we get something else? Hear them out. They're the ones who are dealing with it all day long, and you are not. So be open to those things. And like Sarah said, take it from the stance of, wow, they are actually caring about what's going on, and I should listen to this person.
Yep.
All right. Well, I think that about wraps it up for this episode. This was an episode we were both kind of looking forward to recording. And we will catch you guys on the next one.
Yes, hopefully it won't be 2 months. We'll try to be back sooner than that. But thank you guys for listening. We'll talk to you soon.
Yes. Bye.